There is a ceasefire now between Iran and the United States, but most analysts expect that this war will resume in a week, 2 weeks, a month, but it will resume because it is impossible for the United States and Iran to come to a mutually beneficial and satisfying arrangement. So today I want to look at how this war will evolve. And my argument to you today is that this US-Iran war, it's really the first war of the 21st century. And so I want to explain to you how warfare has evolved these past few hundred years. So the simplest way to fight a war is you would destroy a state's capacity to fight by killing as many soldiers as possible, right? You would arrange to fight the enemy on a battlefield. Whoever wins this battle would win the war. And that was how traditionally wars were fought for hundreds of years. When in the 20th century, something happened, which is that the nation state, developed the capacity to have a lot of people, millions of people. And so the state could always replenish its forces on the battlefield. And so now what you had to do was you had to destroy the state's capacity to produce, to manufacture. Okay? And this is really, and so the point is to kill as many civilians as possible before you want to kill as many soldiers as possible. But in the 20th century war, mainly World War II, you're trying to kill as many civilians as possible. But in the 21st century, it's different because we have nuclear weapons now. And there are too many people. So it is impossible for you to kill everyone. And if you use nuclear weapons, then others will use nuclear weapons on you, okay? So now, in the 21st century, our goal is to use the population against the state, to turn the civilians against the government by sowing as much discord and dissent as possible within society. And you do that through economic sabotage, through economic strangulation, okay? So that's the argument I will make to you today. The first thing I want to look at is, why is it that we have 8 billion people? 8 billion people are living on this planet. And for most of us, we think this is a tremendous achievement. But if you think about it, it's not that nice because there aren't that many resources to share. There's not that much space. In fact, if it were not for fertilizers, we would only be able to support 1 to 2 billion people. So how did we get to a stage where we have 8 billion people in this world, and most of us are not very happy with the state of affairs, okay? And scientists will tell you it's because of the scientific revolution. It's because of this revolution in technology and understanding that's allowed us to progress. That's not true, okay? The real reason is because of the nation state. And the nation state, it is a revolution in politics that came to us because of the French Revolution. All right, so the main architect of the French Revolution, his name is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was not French, he was actually Swiss. But he's important because he developed the theory that underpinned the French Revolution, called social contract theory. Before, we didn't really think about what the individual's relationship with the state was. Basically, you were born into a community and you just did what tradition and custom and family asked you to do. But Jean-Jacques Rousseau was the first to say, no, we are born free because God gave us freedom. So why do we choose to surrender our freedom in order to join a community? Okay? And so his theory is that we join society to become more free. So, by ourselves, we together, okay? All of us, together, we create something called a common will. And think of this as democracy. And democracy is basically the idea that to make a decision, we just vote. And then whatever comes, whichever is the majority wins. So for example, we might debate whether we're going to McDonald's or Pizza Hut, okay? There's 3 of us. If 2 of you say, let's go to Pizza Hut, we go to Pizza Hut. Okay, that's just democracy. For Jean-Jacques Rousseau, this is not a good system because we should strive to be higher than we are. We should strive for total freedom. And that's the idea of the general will, okay? The common will is who we are. The general will is who we could be if we came together as a people, okay? And the best way to understand the general will is through Kant's theory of the categorical imperative, okay? Which is for him the highest moral law. So as human beings, what makes us truly human? What allows us to achieve our ideal state are three principles, okay? The first principle is the principle of universality. So imagine that all your actions will be reflected throughout the universe. So if you smile, everyone smiles at once. If you get angry, everyone gets angry at once. And you ask yourself, what sort of society do I want to live in? Do I want to live in a society where everyone is smiling or angry, right? And then that's the way you should behave, the law of universality. Secondly, is the idea of free will. No one can compel you to smile. You must smile out of your own free choice. Even though smiling makes you feel happy, if I make you smile, that goes against the good of humanity, okay? The third is the idea of human as an end. Okay? So I can never sacrifice another human being in order to achieve a better society because we are the ultimate end. Okay? So these together, the categorical imperative is what gives us the theory of the general will. So even though we all vote to eat ice cream, we shouldn't eat ice cream because that's not how we achieve enlightenment. That's not how we achieve the ideal state. Okay? We should think about Kant's categorical imperative. Now what happens is this. From the general will, this is a sovereign, okay? This is the highest law. This is God, basically. And from the sovereign, we achieve the state, the government. And the state makes us into citizens. And then we have laws, culture, education. Okay? So for Jean-Jacques Rousseau, this is the social contract. This is the ideal state. And the French Revolution started because there were many intellectuals, revolutionaries, who wanted to achieve the social contract. But as you can appreciate, there were many who disagreed with this theory, especially monarchs, right? Because the idea here is that the general will, the people, are the sovereign. But in a monarchy, the monarch is what's sovereign. So the sovereign so it's a debate over who's sovereign. And so at this time in history, most nations, most countries in Europe were monarchies. So they saw the French Revolution as a direct threat to them, and that's why they invaded France many, many times. But then something really weird happened. These professional armies who go into France and they're fighting against these citizens, okay? People with no military experience who are not professional soldiers. What's happening was that they were losing to these citizen armies. And the question is, why was this happening? And the reason why is that this theory is so powerful that it makes people willing to fight, to die for this, okay? Right? So what was happening during the French Revolution, these wars, was that you had the monarchies, and these were professional armies. And so these were basically mercenaries. And the thing about mercenaries is they didn't want to die, right? They're collecting a paycheck. Their point is to intimidate. Their point is to scare. It's not to die. But then you have the French Revolution. And they were citizens. And they were willing to fight and die. Okay? And that's why France became the most powerful nation in Europe at this time, because they could call on their citizens to fight and to die. And it was almost unlimited amount of soldiers. Whereas the other countries like Prussia, Russia, Austria, they had professional soldiers who were afraid to die. All they wanted was their paycheck. So over time, the French were overwhelming the Europeans, and this created the French Empire. All right? But once these places were conquered, they developed their own theory as to how to defeat the French. And they recognized that we also need a theory of nationalism. We also need a theory of the nation state. But they didn't like the social contract theory. Okay? So they came up with a new theory based on nation, which was basically language, culture, and race. And so this becomes Germany. Okay? Or what we call iron and blood. So now you have these theories of nationalism come out into Europe. And now they're invincible because they can call on their citizens to fight and to die. And this is why Europe became the most powerful region of the world starting in the 19th century. Okay? But of course, the problem with nationalism, the problem with populations that want to fight and die is that they keep on fighting wars. But it's not a real, and so what happens is that to solve this problem, all these nations focus on trying to grow the population as fast as possible, as much as possible. And this is what led to this massive population growth. But with more population, what was happening was that these wars were becoming deadlier and deadlier, culminating, of course, in World War II. And by World War II, Europe had exhausted itself. Too many people had died, their civilization was destroyed. And so this allowed America to come into power, okay? America. And America had a different theory of the nation state. So the French, their theory was the social contract. The Germans, their theory is iron and blood, okay, race. The Americans had a different theory because America was a multicultural nation of immigrants who are trying to colonize the Western Hemisphere, North America, right? So for them, their theory is to create a game. The nation state becomes a game. The Constitution and government are the game masters. And what they will allow is for anyone to come to America and get rich, as long as they work hard. And this will create the greatest nation in the world. Okay? So this becomes a game where anyone can play. In fact, the more players that you have, the wealthier America becomes, right? And then after World War II, what happened was that America spread this game throughout the world, as much as it could, right? To Europe and to Japan. But there are still communist countries like China and Soviet Union, which did not want to participate in this game. They had their own game. And so what happened was that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, this game conquered the world, right? You had globalization. Okay? The problem is this. Once this game keeps on going, eventually what happens is that only a few players achieve all the wealth, right? You have massive inequality. And everyone else falls into debt. Okay? And that's the world that we live in today. America created this game. It was very successful in creating tremendous wealth, and they were trying to have as many players as possible. That's why you had the population boom. But now, only a few people have all the wealth, and everyone else is in debt. In other words, these people are useless. And therefore, we need to reset the game. And the way to reset the game, of course, is to destroy the game in the first place. therefore have World War III, burn everything down, and start the game over again. Okay? And that's why we are in the situation we are in today.